Welcome to the NHL Wraparound podcast featuring Neil Smith, President General Manager of the 1994 Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers, and longtime ESPN NHL veteran Vic Morren. Together, they share no-nonsense opinions on news and issues around the National Hockey League. Whether you're a casual or diehard fan, each episode of NHL Wraparound will leave you more informed. Now, here's your hosts, Neil and Vic.
Welcome to the NHL Wraparound podcast, Summer Coolers, presented by Lugaroo. Vic Morren, along with Neil Smith. We have already put the Atlantic Division to bed. Today we will tackle the Metropolitan. And on Monday, the 25th, we'll be dropping the Central Division. And then on Wednesday, August 27th, we wrap up with the Pacific. But before we start, Neil, you know why we're wearing black today?
Well, I know I'm wearing my Lugaroo black shirt because it's got our logo on it, and I love the feel of this shirt. But you are not wearing a Lugaroo shirt, so why are we wearing black?
First of all, I am. And second of all, we're wearing it because the Metropolitan only sent 3 clubs to the playoffs last year as opposed to 5 going over from the Atlantic. That was the Capitals, the Hurricanes, and the Devils. And you could bet that when we do the Pacific Division, who also sent only 3 clubs to the playoffs last year, we'll be wearing black again.
Well, there you go. That's the reasons we've always got a method to the madness here on NHL Wraparound.
So quickly, we're going to remind people the order in which we do this and what we're looking to cover in this show. We will do each of the teams in the Metro today in descending order from last season's finish. So we'll be starting with Washington, ending with Philadelphia. And the way we do this is we're going to look at each team, giving some statistical data, some adds, drops, and re-signs, and then we're going to have discussion. And the objective is not to give predictions, but to really assess, based on the summer movement, whether we believe clubs are closer, further, or kind of hanging in the same space in terms of what their next expected advancement is going to be.
That's right. And it becomes pretty clear when you break it all down the way we do, what at least our expectations are for these teams.
I think the fun part about this also, before we get started, is you learn something even just by talking through this. And we've done a lot of extensive research. We take a lot of notes. But once you start talking it through, you wind up learning more from just going through this process.
Well, I think the debate that we have internally before we do this show, when we talk about these teams is good and healthy because, you know, you may have seen something that I haven't seen and I see something that you may not have seen. And then we put it all together and that's what we deliver.
And let's start delivering.
Okay.
Starting off with the Washington Capitals. Barely made the playoffs in 24. Last season, 51, 22, and 9, 111 points. First in the Metro, first in the East, and second only to Winnipeg in the race for the President's Trophy. They defeated Montreal in the first round of the playoffs in 5 games. It was their first series win since winning the Cup back in 2018. And then they fell to the Carolina Hurricanes in round 2. Generally speaking, very quiet, no true notable additions in terms of their RFA, UFA re-signs. They did re-sign Anthony Beauvillier, 2 years, 2.75 AAV, and restricted free agent Hendrix Lapierre. In terms of the drops, Andrew Mangiapane, left winger, signs with Edmonton. Taylor Radish, right wing, signs with the New York Rangers. Lars Eller, big part of that Stanley Cup winning championship team in 2018. He signs as a UFA with the Ottawa Senators. And Alexander Alexiev signs as a UFA with the Pittsburgh Penguins. A couple of other notes here. TJ Oshie announced his retirement on June 9th. And Nick Backstrom, Neil, who I thought, and I think we both thought, was through due to the back injury that had kept him out all of last season. he's returning home to play in the Swedish league, and that was announced at the end of July.
Yeah, that is surprising because I was surprised by both Oshie and Backstrom. I didn't know that TJ Oshie was that close to retiring. And I did think that Backstrom was on the verge of retiring. So he goes back to play in Sweden in the Elite League and back there. And TJ Oshie hangs it up, and he'll probably end up announcing or broadcasting or scouting or something. Who knows?
One other note I want to point out here, defenseman Martin Ferravari extended with the Capitals 7 years, $6 million AAV. That is effective next season. So the Capitals get him tied up long term. So let's get into a little bit of discussion here. And one of the things that I'm a little bit wary of, despite the fact that Spencer Carberry, entering his third season, won the Jack Adams last year, and the Capitals had 8 players last year that in some way, shape, or form had career numbers. Dylan Strome, Alexi Protas, Tom Wilson, and Connor McMichael all set marks for goals, assists, and points in a season. Pierre-Luc Dubois, career highs in assists and points. Jacob Chikrin, career highs in goals and points. Nick Dowd, goals and points as well. And Logan Thompson, the goaltender, 31 wins and a career best 2.49 goals against average. So where I want to start this is you could see how many things went right for the Capitals a year ago. And to expect a repeat here, that's a pretty daunting task.
It really is. And, you know, there's a number of question marks on this Capitals team because this is not a real young team. This is a team that's got, you know, getting a little bit long in the tooth. You start with Ovechkin and you talk about, can he keep up what he did last year? Hard to believe that he can keep going like the ever-ready bunny that he is, but who knows? You can't count him out. Dylan Strome having a great year. Your favorite guy, Pierre-Luc Dubois, who fit right into the Washington Capitals and had a fabulous year. Tom Wilson, even Anthony Beauvillier has never played well. I mean, to be able to maintain a residence anywhere, but seems to have found one in Washington. How good is Ryan Leonard going to be? Is he going to improve his game? He was a rookie out of college, as we all know. Jacob Chikrin was played like a Norris Trophy candidate last season. John Carlson's getting older. Is he going to be able to keep up the offensive and defensive game that he's had? And as you said, with Ferravari, they gave him a long contract. Is he going to continue his upward trajectory as a player and getting better and better?
You mentioned Ovi, who we did not speak about in that group of 8 players before. Past Wayne Gretzky, you were there to see it live at UBS Arena last season. 897 career goals, so easily going to eclipse the 900 mark in the first couple of weeks of the season. But as the year went on and the record and the chase became so front and center to the Capitals' existence, they finished the season 4-7-1 in their last 12. And when they went into the playoffs against Montreal, we thought, you know what, this is probably going to be the right kind of opponent for them to get their game back on track, because you could see their game slipping over the last quarter of the season. And a lot of that was due to the OV chase and all the attention that was being garnered by it. But when they got to that second round against Carolina, they looked 2 steps slower and they looked totally out of their league. They looked like the club that got swept by the Rangers in 24.
And I'd like to talk to Spencer Carberry at some point. We'll get him on here, I hope, and ask him, because my theory on the Washington Capitals is exactly what you said, is that they didn't think about the chase in the first 2/3 of the season. And then suddenly when it was in front of their face every day in the media and everybody talking about Ovi, and it's going to pass Gretzky, when will it happen? Where will it happen? The first half of the season is, will it happen? Then it became obvious that it will happen. I just think that took their focus off of their team game. And I don't think they ever got it back. I think that Montreal was an unexpected opponent in the playoffs. No one really expected Montreal to make it. So when they made it, that was basically their, banner raising season to have made the playoffs last year. And Washington was able to handle them, not easily, but they handled them. But then they couldn't keep up with Carolina at all. And I think their game fell off in that last third of the season.
There'll be no distraction this year. I think a complete focus on building what they had grown into, and that was the Eastern Conference regular season champions last year. But again, is this a club that we should expect upward trajectory based on their age, based on the fact of how many career years players had last year, and just, is this sustainable? And I think that this is where Carberry is really going to be put to the test.
And I think Spencer Carberry's a really good coach. I mean, obviously he won the Jack Adams last year. And so to say he's a really good coach is sort of takes a lot of intelligence, but can he do it again? Can he keep his team going in that movement? My expectation for the Washington Capitals, I'm going to put it right out there, not my prediction, but my expectation is they're going to take a step backwards for all the reasons and question marks we just talked about. I think they're going to take a step back. Does that mean they won't make the playoffs? No, that doesn't mean they're not going to make the playoffs, but they're not going to be in the running for the President's Trophy all year long until the very end when Winnipeg solidified it. I think they're going to be back further in the pack when this season is done.
And certainly they're not going to be taking anybody by surprise this year. That's another thing, is that when teams play them, Caps are going to have the target on their back.
They are. And teams are going to expect to see Jacob Chychrun and Ovechkin. They've been waiting for him for 21 years every night that they have to play the Capitals. So that's not going to be anything different. Tom Wilson carries the team on his back some nights, I think. I think this team took over the personality of the Wilson team, much the way Florida has the Tkachuk personality now, the Panthers. I think the Caps have the bit of the Wilson personality. So we'll see. Are they going to fight through like they did to prove themselves last year? I expect, for all the reasons we said, that they're not going to be quite as good as they were in 24-25.
But at least no OV distraction this time around. The Carolina Hurricanes finished second in the Metro in 24-25, 99 points, 7th straight playoff appearance. They defeated the Devils in 5 games, the Caps in 5 games that we just mentioned, and then lost to Florida in the Eastern Conference Final in 5 games as well. They've had 3 conference final appearances in the last 7 seasons. But Neil, this is a club that I look at and it's a good team. You know they're going to be in the playoffs every year, but there is an absolute ceiling in terms of how far this club typically can advance.
It sure seems that way, Vic, and we say it every year, and you've been right on every year about this team and their goaltending, not good enough to get them very far in the playoffs. I think they're built as a really good regular season team. I think if you're a Hurricane season ticket holder, you're in for a great 41 home games and great watching them on TV during the regular season. But I don't think they're a team that's built for the playoffs. They're just not. You look at their front line this year, it's going to be great. Nikolai Ehlers, along with Sebastian Aho and Andrei Shvetnikov. I mean, that's pretty good players. And their second line with Jarvis and Jackson Blake and maybe Taylor Hall, who knows? And then you have a checking line of Martinook, Stahl, and Stankoven. That's real good. So they're solid. They're deep. Their defense. Now on defense, Keandre Miller comes in. Let's talk about that for a minute. They paid a big price and a big salary to bring in Keandre Miller. I don't think you and I think as much of Keandre Miller as that trade and that signing would be.
No. And so let's hit the additions for the Hurricanes, because as you mentioned, Keandre Miller comes in a trade with the New York Rangers in exchange for defenseman Scott Morrow, who saw a little bit of action during the playoffs last year. The Hurricanes also surrendered their first 2 picks in 2026, And then Miller signs for 8 years, $7.5 million AAV. And then perhaps even the bigger story was Nikolai Ehlers coming in as a UFA from Winnipeg, 6 years, $8.5 million per. And I think, Neil, this was a move that the Hurricanes had to make. They had to show that they could land a big fish in that Carolina market. But I think one of the things that you shared with me, as soon as the signing was made, it's great for Carolina, but he's just another player kind of in line of already what they have. And Ehlers scored 20-plus goals in 8 of his 10 years as a Winnipeg Jet. He's never reached 30.
No, but he's going to have an opportunity to do that this year playing with these guys because if he's ever going to do it, it's going to be here. And I think that you're right. That the thing about Ehlers is he's a carbon copy of what they've already got. I mean, he's a good player. He's good offensively. He's not a heavyweight. He's not a power forward. He's just more offense. And so, like I said before, I think during the regular season, they're going to be awesome. I would say there's a good chance they're going to win the Metro Division. That's how good they are. And with the Caps taking a step back, as I just said. So, that, and we're going to have to see the development of K'Andre Miller, right? Is he going to develop? Is he going to get better than he was with the Rangers? Because certainly with the Rangers, he took a step backwards last year. I think everybody expected a lot more out of him in New York in 24-25 than they saw.
A couple of other ads that I want to get to because this is going to fit in with the rest of the discussion. Mike Riley comes in from the New York Islanders as an unrestricted free agent, and goalie Caden Primo comes in a trade with the Montreal Canadiens. You're going to get into a little bit of a side story after that. A lot of RFA, UFA re-signs. Taylor Hall, Frederick Anderson, Eric Robinson are the notable re-signs as UFAs for the Hurricanes. The restricted free agents that are re-signed, Logan Stankoven, as Neil had mentioned his name before, 8 years, $6 million on average. Ryan Suzuki, the brother of Canadiens captain Nick Suzuki, and Skylar Brindamore, center and the son of head coach Rod Brindamore. So a little bit of an interesting thing here in that Caden Primo and Skylar Brindamore are going to be playing together.
And both of them have fathers that played for the Hurricanes. And this is amazing. Their fathers were traded for each other. And that put Rod Brindamore into the Carolina Hurricanes to be the captain who held the Stanley Cup over his head when they won it in 2006. And of course, that sent Caden Primo's father, Keith Primo, to the Philadelphia Flyers. And so for those two guys to play, it's a second generation of Hurricanes for sure. I'm sure there's a lot of pressure on Skylar Brindamore, though, when your dad is behind the bench. That must be something very unique. So that we'll see how that all turns out. Caden Primo had some real good nights with the Montreal Canadiens, so let's see if he develops. But they'll be depending on that for their future.
The Keith Primo-Rod Brindamore trade took place in 2000. And, of course, Keith Primo, not to digress here, but he had some heroics scoring in that 5 overtime game for the Flyers against the Pittsburgh Penguins in the playoffs of that year. Let's talk about the drops here because this is significant. In addition to Morrow going to New York in the K'Andre Miller deal, Brent Burns signs as a UFA with the Colorado Avalanche, and perhaps even more significant, Dmitry Orlov signs as a UFA with the San Jose Sharks. So when you look at the collective here, they lose Burns, Orlov, and a prospect in Morrow, and they gain K'Andre Miller and Mike Riley. So where I'm sitting here, their offense is definitely better with the addition of Ehlers. The defense is worse, and the goaltending has not been truly addressed. It looks like it's going to be Freddie Anderson, Pyotr Kochetkov, and then we'll see what Caden Primo can bring. But this is still not elite goaltending, in my opinion, to get the Hurricanes anywhere beyond where they have topped out in recent seasons.
Agreed. In the playoffs, let's take a look at the defense. Here's one of my worries for the Carolina Hurricanes on this, and I want to see how this turns out. Brent Burns has been there for quite a while, is a great example to young players for the Hurricanes. Is first at the rink, last to leave, workout ethic like nobody's business. They weren't going to re-sign him. He signs a 1-year deal in Colorado. Now, we all know why, because of his age. But when you lose a leadership person like that, let's see how that affects their locker room. You're right about Orlov as a defenseman. He wanted a long deal. He couldn't get it in Carolina. He got it in San Jose. Morrow goes to the Rangers in the K'Andre Miller deal. If you remember, Morrow and Nikishin both had little cameos in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they felt that Alexander Nikishin was the guy they wanted to hold on to, and they let Morrow go to the Rangers in the Miller trade. So their defense looks like this. K'Andre Miller, Jacob Slavin, you got to think is their number one guy now. Alexander Nikishin is their young guy, up and coming, big question mark. Jalen Chatfield has proven himself to be a good top 4 defenseman. You've got Shane Gostisbehere, who's a great power play defenseman for the point, and then Walker, who is also a very good, top 6 defenseman. Mike Riley slips in, I guess, as their number 7, as he was sort of in and out with the Islanders after being claimed on waivers from Florida. Their defense is going to be a question mark until it's not a question mark, because with Brent Burns and Orlov gone, I want to see how that affects this team. And like you said, with the goaltending being suspect as it has been for the last couple of years, their defense has got to be good to cover up if, in fact, on nights when something goes in that shouldn't go in.
I'm going to be interested to see how Mike Riley does, because he had the heart ailment. He had another issue health-wise last season. I think this is a good under-the-radar pickup by the Hurricanes and general manager Eric Tulsky. And before I let the Hurricanes go, we're talking about their offense, and I certainly don't want the Canes fans angry at us, because Seth Jarvis continues to be an outstanding center for the team. 32 goals, 35 assists, and 67 points. But again, Neil, right or wrong, this team is better, or are they just the same as they were a year ago?
No, I think they're better offensively, Vic. I think that, we haven't talked a lot about Jackson Blake. I mean, they gave him a big, long contract. They really believe in him. He certainly showed signs last year. So when you talk about Ehlers, Aho, Shvetnikov, Jarvis, Blake, and then you've got the guys that can chip in on the third and fourth line, like Martinook and Stahl and Stankoven. They got a great group of forwards. They really do. I don't question their forwards at all. And if anything's going to carry them to the Metro Division crown, it's going to be those forwards. They're question marks. And guys, everybody has question marks. Everybody. Yep. Let's not get that. Let's make that straight. Their question mark is still in goal. And now they've got question marks on defense because they made changes. They made changes to Brent Burns is gone. K'Andre Miller is in. Morrow is gone as a 7th. Nikishin was kept. And Orlov has gone to San Jose because he couldn't get a long enough contract with Carolina. And he was also a great guy on the point. They must feel they're okay with Shane Gostisbehere, who is a good point man on the power play. So in my mind, that's their question marks. I anticipate they'll be in the running for first place in that division.
Yeah, but what about after that?
I can't predict. I don't think they're built like a playoff team.
That's the question then. Well, they're built like a playoff team, but they're not built to be a Stanley Cup team. It's just not.
No, exactly. Yes, they don't play playoff hockey all year long like the Florida Panthers do. Mm-hmm. They play regular season hockey, and they're very good at it. But when the playoffs come, and they get against an opponent who plays playoff hockey, they don't have the ability to switch to playoff hockey.
Work still to be done there, I believe, before we get to the trade deadline sometime next March. The New Jersey Devils finished third in the Metro, 91 points, lost in the opening round to the Hurricanes, and a few interesting pickups during the course of the offseason. I don't think a lot of headline stuff, but interested to see Tom Fitzgerald's mindset here. They pick up Jeremy Hansel in a trade with Nashville in exchange for Eric Holla. He was a good player, Hansel was, in juniors, playing for Seattle. Not as good in the minors last season. They also pick up Connor Brown as a UFA from Edmonton, 4 years, $3 million on average. And Evgeny Dodonov signs as a UFA from Dallas for $1 million for 1 year. Both of them projected to be bottom six forwards. But I like the acquisition of Brown in particular, and I think both of us thought that Stan Bowman would make it a priority to hold on to Brown in Edmonton.
I thought that they would. I really like Connor Brown and the way he played for Edmonton. I thought he was a good ingredient in that mix in Edmonton that they needed, but they didn't keep him, and he signs in New Jersey. New Jersey likes to play that hard game of trying to be hard to play against. Don't forget that the real high-skilled guys are very slight. So they've got to have a lot of guys that make it very hard to play against them. I like the Danoff signing coming from Dallas. He didn't, obviously Peter DeBoer wasn't big on Danoff because he didn't play him a lot. Yeah. And I guess he wants to prove himself. That's why he took a 1-year deal at $1 million and is going to try to do that this year. So, the Devils, they're going to be healthy, obviously, to start the season. Hamilton and Hughes are going to be healthy, meaning Jack Hughes up front. And that will be the key for them is, can they stay healthy? I like the Jake Allen signing. Obviously, he was a huge part of their team. Tom Fitzgerald didn't want to lose Jake Allen. And it's rare that you see that the general manager makes such an exerted effort to go to 5 years on a backup goalie that's already aging. Now, I know the way contracts are done today that they know they're going to eat a couple of those years down the road. But they felt it was that important that Jake Allen was a big part of their locker room and that they needed to keep him.
One other notable signing, an RFA, Cody Glass center, re-ups with the Devils on July 2nd. But let's talk about the drops, because in addition to Eric Holla, who I was somewhat surprised Devils let him go, because I thought he was a very effective bottom six forward. He's off to Nashville in that Hansel deal. Brian Dumoulin, defenseman, signs with the LA Kings. Curtis Lazar signs as a UFA with Edmonton. And Nathan Bastian, who had a little bit of grit and sandpaper to his game, signs as a UFA with the Dallas Stars. So as we start to now look at the Devils, and we have some hellish questions about the Devils, that's was your little quirky line for us to get into discussion with them. So I think the Hughes return is going to be significant. I actually like this club because Nico Hischier, career high 35 goals. Jesper Bratt, 67 assists. 5th in the NHL last season, career high 88 points. I think a couple of guys that they need to really step up, though. Andre Palat has played 3 seasons with the Devils. He had all that Stanley Cup pedigree with the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I believe he was going to bring more offensively to the table than he's brought so far. He's played 197 games for the Devils in 3 seasons. That's 34 goals and 82 points. And I think another player that's got to step up and become a 30-35 goal guy is Timo Meier, who was acquired about a year and a half ago from the San Jose Sharks.
Yeah, I agree with you that those two guys have got to get better. I think Meier got better last year in a Devils uniform, seemed to find his way and get comfortable. Up front, with Palat, Hughes, Jesper Bratt, I agree. Palat's got to do more, but Hughes will be healthy, and Brad is really good. Second line is really good too, with Nosen, Heischer, and Meyer. That's going to be formidable. They can score on both of those lines, and then Mercer and Cody Glass are the third and fourth line centers. Talk about their defense for a minute, Vic. I like the Brendan Dillon with Dougie Hamilton pairing. Tom Fitzgerald, when he was on our show, said that, it was important to get Dillon to pair him with Dougie Hamilton, so Dougie Hamilton knew he was safe, that people couldn't run all over him. You've got Luke Hughes and Brett Pesce. Those are both good top four defensemen. And then they have Siegenthaler and Nemeth as their fifth and sixth guys, or third and fourth, whatever you want to say about them. And they bring in Jeremy Hansel as, I guess, their number 7 guy. Now, my little comment about Hansel, do you think they'll go out and trade for Gretel?
Well, we knew that was coming. So find us a Gretel, and maybe Tom Fitzgerald will make a deal for him. But overall, I think this is a solid club. Do they get enough respect?
Oh, I think so. I think, especially now that they've got really good goaltending, that they should get the respect. And I think, here again is my expectation, that the New Jersey Devils, if they stay healthy, will battle with the Hurricanes to grab the top of the Metro Division. It's not a great division this year, folks. I think it's easy to predict who's definitely in and who's definitely out. But I do think my expectation is the Devils will take a step up this year and compete hard for first in that division.
And perhaps the combination of Jacob Markstrom and Jake Allen in goal makes that difference. The Columbus Blue Jackets, 89 points, missed the playoffs, but did finish in the upper tier of the Metro. They missed the playoffs for the 5th straight season, and this club only has one playoff series win in their entire franchise history, when they swept the Tampa Bay Lightning in the opening round in 2019. Big note for them, offensively, finished tied for 7th, 3.26 goals per game. But 16 times last season, they scored at least 6 goals in a game. So there was certainly a little bit of offensive pop on this club. The notable adds for the Blue Jackets during the offseason, Charlie Coyle and Miles Wood come in from Colorado in exchange for a prospect, Gavin Brindley, and 2 draft picks. And Hudson Fasching also signed as a UFA coming in from the New York Islanders. In terms of their signings, Ivan Provorov re-signs as a UFA with the Blue Jackets, 7 years, $8.5 million AAV, and Dante Fabro as well, 4 years at $4.125 million. They also re-up Owen Sillinger, Dmitry Voronkov as an RFA, and they also bring in defenseman Damon Hunt. So I think this is a very interesting club this year, Neil, because I believe they were looking to seek a new identity after the tragic death of Johnny Gaudreau, along with his brother Matthew. And they did that for most of the season. They were really riding the emotion. They were galvanized. And for all intents and purposes, it looked like they were a playoff-bound team after they played that outdoor game with the Detroit Red Wings on the 1st of March. They were 30, 22, and 8 at that time. And then they slipped badly. It was like that game was the tripwire to them slipping.
And while they slipped, of course, we know that Ottawa and Montreal put it into another gear. And that's what decided that bubble, as we had that bubble lock challenge, you'll remember.
Oh, yeah.
And the Columbus Blue Jackets fell back a little bit. I know that in an emotional way, we were all cheering for the Columbus Blue Jackets because of what happened with the Gaudreau brothers in the late offseason last year. I think this is going to be an interesting team. I think that the big question mark here, Vic, is can Dean Evason continue to motivate this team, continue to have a carrot to put in front of them like they had last year already built into their season because of that tragedy. Sean Monahan had a fabulous season. Ken Marchenkov, Chinakhov, young Fantilli, is he going to take another step in the right direction? I expect that he will. Kent Johnson's a heck of a player. Boone Jenner was out most of last year with an injury. He's going to be back this year and healthy. And it's interesting, they got Charlie Coyle, who, from what I hear, is going to wear number 3. He wore number 13 when he was with the Bruins. And he'll be on a line. If he's on a line with Sillinger wears number 4. So this might be the first time in a long time in the NHL we've ever seen two guys on the same line as forwards wearing number 3 and number 4. Talking about their defense for a minute, Zach Werenski had a great year for them. The best year of his career came in very close to the top in the Norris Trophy voting. Dante Fabro is a young up-and-coming defenseman. Let's talk about one of the things that we're all shocked about, and not in a positive way, is the signing of Ivan Provorov for 7 years and $8.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
I was stunned when I saw those numbers.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to be able to get 7 years out of him, and I don't think he's worth $8.5 million. So that's the one thing that I would question. You're not in the seat, so you don't know how hard it is when you're in Columbus to keep guys there that are really good players. But that is a big, big nut to have in your salary cap.
I want to talk about their drops and then circle back to the collective parts that are now with the Blue Jackets. Daniel Tarasov, backup goalie to Elvis Merzlikins, traded to Florida, so it looks like Jet Greaves will get the opportunity to be the full-time backup. Sean Corrali signs as a UFA with Boston. Jordan Harris, who is part of that Patrick Laine deal with Montreal, he signs as a UFA with the Boston Bruins. Justin Danforth goes to the Buffalo Sabres, and James Van Riemsdyk signs as a UFA with the Detroit Red Wings. So now when you look at what's remaining with the club, and you'd mentioned Sean Monahan before, and he had a good season when he was able to play, but remember, he had that wrist injury that sidelined him for a good portion down the stretch. And, when you look at this club that they went 4-11-1 down the stretch before winning their last 6, only to finish 2 points behind Montreal for the second wild card position, it just goes to show you what a fine line it is. And had Monahan been healthy and had Boone Jenner been able to play for the entire season, this may have ended up much differently. But now, as we step forward, this is what the Blue Jackets are. And can they repeat this and be sustainable for 82 games as opposed to maybe 72?
And don't forget, the one guy you left out, Kirill Marchenko, sitting on the bench, taking a shot in the face with the puck, breaking his jaw. Sitting on the bench and had to miss games and then came back with his mouth wired up and a cage on the front. So there was some bad luck there with their captain, Boone Jenner, sitting out. Sean Monahan, truly a leader on the team, especially with the Johnny Gaudreau friendship issue. We're gonna have to see. I think that they again are going to be a bubble team, but I think that their chances of making the playoffs are just as good as everybody that we've talked about, with the exception of the Hurricanes and the Devils. I think that the Hurricanes and the Devils are the cream of the crop of this division, but I think that the Blue Jackets are going to be right in the mix to get into the playoffs in the Metro.
Want to give out one shout out to, I think, a player that's become a favorite from around the league with his personality, his toughness, and also scored a career high 18 goals last year. That's Matthew Olivier.
Yeah. Yes, he has become a favorite. He's certainly a favorite in Columbus, and deservingly so. He can score, and then he can turn around and fight you at the same time. So it looks like he'll play on a line with Miles Wood, and we all know that Miles Wood has the ability to fine-tune the opponent now and then, too, with his body and his physical play. So, that's a good shout-out for Olivier. He deserves it.
That wraps up the top half of the Metropolitan Division from 24-25. We'll return with the Rangers, Islanders, Penguins, and Flyers after a word from Lou Garou. There's a brand born in hockey locker rooms that now outfits the majority of pro sports teams across North America. It's called Lou Garou. Lou Garou makes performance apparel for every moment of an athlete's day. The early lift, the morning skate, the flight to the next city, or dinner after a win. Quiet, technical, built to last, no noise, no ego. If you're the guy who shows up early, stays late, and doesn't need applause, this is your uniform. The cut is sharp, the details deliberate, and the gear holds its shape when the day gets heavy. Hockey players choose it because it supports the work between shifts, the hours that actually decide the game. Check out Lou Garou at lougarou.co. That's LOOGAROO.co. And use the promo code Wraparound and you'll get free shipping. More than ready, Lou Garou. Welcome back to the NHL Wraparound podcast, Summer Coolers, presented by Lou Garou. We continue on with the New York Rangers. After winning the President's Trophy in 23-24, they became just the fourth team in history to have the best mark in the league and then miss the playoffs the following season. Big problem? Special teams. 28th on the power play. Penalty killing was 11th with 18 shorthanded goals to lead the league, but both of those were third in their President's Trophy winning season. So clearly drops in that area. Their additions, the big one, Vladislav Gavrikov signing as a UFA from the LA Kings, 7 years, $7 million AAV. They get Radish signed as a UFA from Washington, and Scott Morrow comes over in the aforementioned Keandre Miller deal. In terms of their RFA signings, Will Cooley, most significant, 2 years, $3.9 million on average. And they also bring Matt Rempe back into the lineup. But perhaps, Neil, even more significant are the drops. We've already mentioned Keandre Miller. We mentioned Zach Jones in the Atlantic Division preview. He signed with the Buffalo Sabres as a UFA after not being qualified with the Rangers. And this was a guy that I believe showed some promise, or maybe just wasn't given the opportunity that was necessary in New York. But the big one, Chris Kreider, traded on June 12th to Anaheim in a deal that brought back center Carey Terrence. And Kreider, one of the all-time Ranger greats, and this just continues a dismantling of the club, which really began last summer.
Yeah, it did. And it began with the captain, Jacob Trouba, who they tried to trade to Detroit, couldn't get it done. He has to come into camp with all the rumors swirling around about him. And they go on from that to have a good start to the season, 12-4, I believe it was, until they ran into Edmonton and then got obliterated in Edmonton and then came home and lost to the Devils. And apparently all hell broke loose upstairs. And a memo went out, a text message that Kreider and Trouba, maybe others, were available. That got back to Kreider, and Kreider wasn't happy about it. That, combined with some injuries that he had, made his year abysmal for the Rangers. And then they trade him to Anaheim, where he joins Jacob Trouba. But one thing we do know is that they still have Igor Shesterkin in net, who's going to be one of the top goaltenders in the league again this season, as he has been the last few seasons. And so that will cover up a lot of mistakes. But definitely, if you're a Rangers fan, when you go to Madison Square Garden this year, buy a program, bring a lineup, because it's not going to be the same team as you saw last year.
You're going to get into the defense in a second, but I want to talk about offensively, because with Kreider out of the lineup, where's the offense going to come from? Artemi Panarin had 49 goals and 120 points in 23-24. He slipped by 12 goals and 31 points during the course of last season. Mika Zibanejad, terrible year, and a team worst minus 22. I think you're going to have to expect JT Miller, Vinny Trocheck, and it's about time that Alexis Lafreniere shows why he was a number one overall pick. This is a player that I believe is going to have his last chance to really shine in New York. He's expected to play with Panarin and Trocheck, and if he can't deliver the goods, I expect him to be out of New York the same way they moved Capo Caco last year.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, and I'm not sure that he can do it. He's going to have to play a heck of a lot better than he played last year, and a heck of a lot different, and put his nose down to the grindstone a lot more. Sort of could take a cue from Cooley, who is a fan favorite. Will Cooley is at Madison Square Garden. Why? Because his work ethic, his physical play is so good. I think too, Vic, you hit on another point. I think Mika Zibanejad, as good as he's been over the years they've had him there, and it was Jeff Gorton who stole him from the Ottawa Senators, that he has been excellent for them. Up until last year, he wasn't good at all. He can't have another year like last year. He's got to come through this year. I'm not sure whether or not Lafreniere can play on a top line. I personally don't see it. But they do have, as you said, Miller, Zibanejad, Trocheck, Panarin, and Will Cooley is really up and coming. So those guys are all good. The question mark offensively is Perreault. How good is Perreault? How good can he become? Brand new coach too, Mike Sullivan. How does Mike Sullivan see this team? How is Mike Sullivan going to see this team by the end of October, when he knows the players and he knows what he can expect from them? It's all up in the air right now as to, with this forward group, as to what to expect out of them.
It looks like Perreault is going to get the first shot on the third line. But right behind him, a couple of other young left wings that are looking to crack this lineup. We saw Brett Berard have some time with the Rangers. Brennan Hoffman, I think also, it's about time that he gets a crack in this lineup as well. But as much as we've seen questions on the offensive side of this defense, as you said before, you need a program.
You definitely do. And it's hard to imagine 2 years ago when they won the President's Trophy with Trouba, heart and soul Ryan Lindgren, up and coming powerful guy like K'Andre Miller. And then, of course, the Norris Trophy winner, Adam Fox. People were really bragging about the Rangers and their defense. And now the only guy left of that group is Fox. Mm-hmm. Now, they brought in Gavrikov, as you mentioned, from the LA Kings, gave him a huge contract. He was one of the biggest fishes in the pond, in the free agent pond, and Chris Drury was able to get him to come to New York. He'll probably play with Fox, which may be, the Bookaboo and Leach, or Gavrikov and Fox. Maybe that's what they're thinking there. But then the question marks start after that, when you've got Soucy and Borgen as number 3 and 4. You've got Vaakanainen and Braden Schneider as maybe 5 and 6. I think Schneider might be in the top 4, but it's not a lot of depth on defense for the Rangers, and not a lot of what we're used to seeing from them. So there's a lot of question marks on their defense, and Shesterkin will have to be Shesterkin for this defense.
So our big Broadway question about the Rangers is Mike Sullivan comes in as head coach, and this is somebody that Chris Drury has wanted for a while. It's Drury's third hiring as general manager. Started with Gerard Gallant. He lasted 2 years. Went on to Peter Laviolette. Lasted 2 years. Sullivan has Stanley Cup championships, 2 of them with the Pittsburgh Penguins in 2016, 2017. Didn't have a lot of recent success. Where do you see his influence becoming a real positive that this club can rally around? Because certainly last season, it looked like a rudderless ship.
Mike Sullivan is thought of as one of the best coaches in the NHL. And for good reason. He won 2 straight Stanley Cups with Pittsburgh. However, he just missed the playoffs 3 years in a row as coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins. So which Mike Sullivan is going to be behind the bench? Is it going to be the one that won the Stanley Cups in Pittsburgh? Or is it going to be the one that's missed the playoffs 3 years in a row with Malkin, Letang, and Crosby? You can't hang all the credit for the Cups on Mike Sullivan. You can't hang all the blame for the missed playoffs on Mike Sullivan. But how good is Mike Sullivan as a coach? We're going to find out, because this group, to get into the playoffs, is going to have to overachieve. You got to get this group to overachieve. And if you can get them to overachieve, they'll make the playoffs. If they just go what expectation-wise, they're going to be in a battle in the bubble with the Columbus Blue Jackets at all. And so I think there's going to be pressure on Mike Sullivan in one way, shape, or form. And all he has to look at it is predecessors. They only last 2 years. So at the end of this coming year, he'll be halfway. But we'll find out with Mike Sullivan. Is he a good coach? Because can he do, for example, what Spencer Carberry did for the Washington Capitals last year? Clearly, they overachieved. Clearly, and we've already gone through them. That's what's going to happen with this group. He does have one ace in the hole, though, Shesterkin. He's got one of the very best goalies in the league.
The New York Islanders. New general manager, Matthew Darche, placing Lou Lamoriello. And I think one of the first places to start statistically with this club that missed the playoffs last year, 500 record, 12th in the East, 23rd overall in the league. The special teams have been dreadful. Both special teams coaches were dismissed at the end of last season. Power play was 31st. Penalty killing was 31st. And when you add those two numbers up, it comes to 62. And that was the worst special teams index in the NHL. Let's talk about their ads. Picked up Emil Heineman and the 16th and 17th overall picks in the draft in the Noah Dobson deal. That was Victor Eklund, who is the brother of William Eklund, who plays for the San Jose Sharks. He's a right wing, and defenseman Keyshawn Aitchison also was selected with one of those picks. They also pick up David Riddick, goaltender signed as a UFA from the LA Kings, 1 year, $1 million. This is somewhat of a safety blanket in the event that Semyon Varlamov cannot return to form. He is expected to training camp this year. And the Islanders also signed Jonathan Drouin. 2 years, $4 million per year, coming out of Colorado. Let's hit the RFA UFA re-signs. We're going to start with the UFAs first. Kyle Palmieri re-ups 2 years, $4.75 per year. And Tony D'Angelo, 1 year, $1.75 million. But I think more intriguing are the RFAs that Darche was able to keep on board. First was Alexander Romanov, defenseman, 8 years, $6.25 million. So you'd have to think that he is being looked at as the top backliner on the Islanders. And they also re-signed defenseman Adam Boqvist, right wing Simon Holmstrom, center Matt Gackhome, and right wing Maxim Siplakov, who I thought had a pretty decent year last season, 2 years, $2.5 million. And the Islanders and Siplakov were able to come to an agreement before they went to arbitration. They lose Noah Dobson in the trade with Montreal to bring Emil Heineman in. And Mike Riley, as we mentioned earlier, signed as a UFA by the Carolina Hurricanes. So this is an interesting club, Neil, and you've seen so much of them over the last couple of years. They don't have a lot in their prospect pool. So it's almost kind of what you see is what you get.
It's going to be a very interesting new look Islanders, because without Lou Lamoriello around there with an iron fist on every single syllable that's uttered in the building, and a new rookie GM, a whole new outlook, they're not going to be the team that started last season. They don't have Noah Dobson, who is clearly number one defenseman, and they don't have really anybody as offensively gifted back there as Noah Dobson. Romanov is not an offensively gifted player. He's a good backliner that good defensively and can hit you and knock you out, but he's not a guy that you're going to put on the power play. Tony DeAngelo can play the power play, does play the power play, but he's not Dobson. He doesn't have the rocket that Dobson had or has, but he's moved on to Montreal. The other guy that they're going to really miss at the beginning of the season, at least, is Brock Nelson, who Lou Lamoriello traded at the deadline to Colorado. And so without those two power play players, Dobson and Brock Nelson, and a power play that was 31st in the league to begin with, they're going to have to do some miracles to make this power play be very effective. They still have Horvat. They brought in Jonathan Drouin, who really improved his game while with Colorado and has rectified his career after being a very high pick to the Tampa Bay Lightning, if you remember. And then Tampa Bay traded him to Montreal. And so you've also got the question mark of Matthew Barzal coming back from a broken kneecap. How is he going to be? Is it healed? Is he okay? Will he be the same? I agree with you that Siplikov had a good year. Holmstrom had a real good year for them. And if those two improve their trajectory in getting better, that will really help the Islanders. Anders Lee, the captain, fantastic season last year. I can't say enough about him. The way he played, he had a career year in my mind. But he's getting older. He's not going to keep going upwards. He's going to actually either stay the same or go down a little bit. So, and then you've got the question mark of Anthony Duclair, who took personal time off because the coach criticized him, or that was what was said. That's why he was taking personal time at the end of the season and never came back. So that's your forward group. And we've talked a little bit about their defense. The newcomer, the first overall pick, Matthew Schaefer, if he makes the team, which they probably will see after 10 games, because if he's still there after 10 games, he's on the team, because they're not going to burn up a year of his entry-level contract. We'll see what we can get out of him. That's an unknown for now. Anyways, everybody in the hockey world thinks he's going to be great and be your number one guy. Maybe he'll be the number one guy right away, like a Dennis Potvin, but we have to wait on that. That second pair of Pelech and Pulak are veterans that we saw last year along with Mayfield. We know what they can bring. It's not a great team. It's a team that's looking to the future, an organization that's looking to the future. They're not looking to the present. So the present has a lot of question marks. They certainly don't look like they're obviously better than last year. I don't think that they are.
I want to go back to Noah Dobson for a second, because folks that listen to the Atlantic Division Summer Cooler heard us say that we think $9.5 million was too much. There was way too much that the Canadians gave up in exchange for him in the deal that brought Emil Heineman in. Yet you have shared with me in a conversation that we had yesterday that Dobson is still a significant loss for the Islanders, even though we don't think he's worth the money for the Canadians.
Well, look, here's my thing. There's 32 teams. So therefore, there's 32 number one defensemen, right? So Dobson is not in the top half of the league of top defenseman. He's not Adam Fox. Okay. He may be 25th on the number one defenseman list. He's still, he's still taking him off the Islanders. They lose their number one defenseman. So even though Montreal, we think overpaid, they brought him in there. He's going to probably do real good for Montreal. He did have defensive liabilities for the Islanders, no doubt. Playing with this group, he had major defensive liabilities for them, and but they have to replace him with somebody. They might think that Schaefer can do it right away. They might think that while Schaefer develops, they've got Tony DeAngelo there to be on the power play. But this group, there's no doubt that you're starting 25-26 without Brock Nelson and without Noah Dobson. I don't see Brock Nelson in this lineup, and I don't see the Noah Dobson in this lineup. And so therefore, my prediction or expectation is they're not going to be as good.
One final note on the Islanders, because Ilya Sorokin is certainly one of the finest goaltenders in the National Hockey League. But when Varlamov went down last year, it was goalie by number as to who would be the backup, who would get the odd game to spell Sorokin a bit. I think that David Riddick can be a real good addition to this club if Varlamov can't go. And if Varlamov can go, it certainly gives the Islanders a formidable 1-2 in net.
Yeah, if Varlamov can go, then David Riddick makes $1 million playing in Bridgeport, Connecticut, where the team is definitely. I'll make one prediction on this show. Bridgeport next season will have a better home record than they had last season.
I'm sure Rocky Thompson will be able to deliver more than 4 wins at home than what the Bridgeport Islanders had a year ago.
But as I said, Vic, this is an organization that's looking to the future. They're not looking to the present. That is obvious by the moves that their general manager made. They're going to have a new feeling to the organization now that Lou Lamoriello, Hall of Fame general manager, is gone, and young Matthew Darch is there from the Tampa Bay Lightning. And we'll see what will we expect from Patrick Waugh. Can he get this group to overachieve? We talk about overachieving. It's really important. I mean, and the other thing is Patrick Waugh doesn't get off the hook on these poor special teams just because they fired the 2 assistant coaches that handled the special teams. It's the head coach's responsibility to make sure they have good special teams. He doesn't get off. So I want to see this season, how will Patrick Waugh fare? Now he doesn't have the iron fist of Lou Lamoriello upstairs. He's got the rookie GM. How is he going to handle that? And how will he get this group to overachieve? Because clearly, if they have any hope of making the playoffs, they have to overachieve.
How long of a leash does Waugh have with a new GM that did not hire him?
That is a good question that I can't answer, but I would expect that Patrick Waugh will be Patrick Waugh and try to walk all over Matthew Darch, but we'll find out as the season goes on.
The Pittsburgh Penguins, they will have a new voice behind their bench for the 25-26 season in rookie head coach Dan Muse, who comes over, former assistant with the New York Rangers, taking over from Mike Sullivan, who is now the head coach of the New York Rangers. And, he's going to have a pretty daunting task ahead of him, because when I look at who the Penguins acquired during the offseason to this point, it's like looking at the Boston Bruins all over again. So I'm going to go through the names and then we'll react off of that. They add defenseman Connor Clifton from Buffalo. Right wing, Justin Brazeau. It's a UFA from Minnesota. Anthony Mantha, right wing UFA from Calgary. Raphael Harvey-Pinard signed as a UFA from the Canadiens. Alexander Alexiev signed as a UFA from Washington after he wasn't qualified. Matt Dumba comes over in a trade with the Dallas Stars. And maybe the most significant was Artur Silovs, goaltender acquired in a trade with the Vancouver Canucks. In terms of their re-signs, a couple of UFAs that they held on to, Connor Dewar, no Gene's joke here, please, and Philip Tomasino, a center. And the most significant drop was goaltender Alex Nedeljkovic, who was traded to San Jose for a third-round pick in 2028. But the mindset here for Kyle Dubas is that you've got Sidney Crosby's 38, Chris Letang's 38, Evgeny Malkin's 39, Erik Karlsson's 35. And if you're trying to surround this aging core, and add Karlsson in if you want, but if you're trying to surround them with quality pieces to make one last playoff run, I don't see it.
This is waving the white flag to me. This team is waving the white flag. They're saying we want to be in contention for a lottery pick. And they've why isn't Karlsson traded? They were saying at the beginning in the springtime, Karlsson's available. We're going to trade him this summer. Nothing has happened. He's still there. That might be because they didn't try or because nobody wanted him. It's going to be miserable in Pittsburgh this year. It just is. Not that it hasn't been for the last 3 years. And I pity Dan Muse, who comes in from the New York Rangers, as you said, while Mike Sullivan goes the other way from Pittsburgh to New York Rangers. As a rookie head coach, this is what he starts with. It reminds me of David Quinn getting his first opportunity with a Ranger team you knew couldn't make the playoffs. And then his next opportunity was with the San Jose Sharks team that you knew for sure was going to be a lottery pick team. And this poor guy didn't have a chance in either spot. And I don't know. I don't want to say Dan Muse has no chance because that wouldn't be fair. But he's got a tough hill to climb.
You look at this franchise and how proud they were only a few years ago, but truth is Sidney Crosby's probably going to miss the playoffs for the fourth straight year. The team has not won a playoff series since winning the Stanley Cup against Nashville in 2017. They've got a couple of decent support parts. Rickard Rakell scored 35 goals, 35 assists last year. Brian Russ had 31 goals. So there's a couple of pieces that are there, but simply not enough to get this team over the hump over the course of an 82-game season. And
no depth. They have no quality depth. You know, they have Malkin on the second line. They have Anthony Mantha. You know, I don't know what he's going to be this year. But no, they just don't have the depth to compete for a playoff spot. And I think of the teams that we've reviewed so far, this one, along with Boston, is the most glaring teams with their deficiencies.
The club also doesn't have a real deep prospect pool. They're listed in the bottom half per The Athletic, and probably one player maybe to look for is left wing Rutger McGrady, who came over to trade from Winnipeg, something that he kind of forced the hands of the Jets and Kevin Cheveldayoff to move him. But besides that, they also had $13 million in cap space. And you look at the players that they brought in, and you have to have thought somewhere along the line, maybe there was more of an upgrade in store than what we've seen.
Yeah, and you've also got to look at ownership and say that the Fenway Group bought the club from the Lemieux partners and now have it back out on the market again. And so they obviously expected better results than they've gotten so far. And maybe they were told they were in a different spot with this team than they were. A lot of people that aren't really up to speed on hockey might have thought that, well, geez, if we can get Crosby and Malkin and this Letang guy, we got to have a good team. We got Sidney Crosby. But that's not the way it works. So, we have not seen any reason to say that this team is improving.
And they're the oldest club in the NHL to boot.
Yeah. So
at 31 and a half years old on average. So I wanted to ask one more question, circling back to Dan Muse, because it's a new voice after close to a decade with Mike Sullivan. New approach. Is this ideal for Crosby, Malkin, and company to have a first-time NHL coach now take over at the back end of their careers where they're just hoping for one more playoff berth?
I really can't answer that. I think Sidney is a guy that will adapt and work with anybody. I think he's a quality person and high character guy and captain of his team. And I think that he'll adapt, work with anybody. But Sidney and Eugenie and Letang and Carlson, they don't have a chance at the playoffs. So, and I think the unfortunate news is that Sidney's going to have to go elsewhere if he wants to make the playoffs before the end of his career. That's just factually the way it is.
We heard people starting rumors. Not sure if there was really anything of substance last year, but if the playoffs are out of reach in January and early February, is this something you believe could get revisited with Sidney Crosby? I mean, if you're in that GM chair, if you're in Kyle Dubas' position, would you look to trade Crosby if he wished to move on to another club to finish his career and have one more shot at the playoffs and potentially Stanley Cup?
Yeah, I would go to ownership and say Sid is asked to be moved to a team that he has a chance with. And can I look around and find out what we can do? And I definitely would. Yeah. I mean, because otherwise they've got a diminishing asset, even though it's Sidney Crosby. If he retires in a Penguins jersey, they get nothing except a nice night at the beginning of the next season. So I would say that you have to make a move with him. So Pat Brisson, his agent, will be checking with him all the time. Sid, do you want to stay? Do you want to go? What do you want? What do you need me to do? And we'll see. And we'll see if he wants to stay and end it in Pittsburgh, even though they're not going to be a playoff team.
But let's give Dan Muse a chance, and perhaps the club gets off to a good start and surprises a lot of us.
Let's hope so.
The Philadelphia Flyers, another new voice behind their bench, Rick Tocchet, taking over for Brad Shaw, who replaced John Tortorella. The club finished 6 games below 500 last season, missed the playoffs for the 5th consecutive year. The last time in there, in fact, was in the bubble in Toronto in 2020. Perhaps one of the most glaring statistical pieces about the Flyers is their power play, which managed to bounce up to 30th last year at 15%, but in the 3 prior years was last. And so this has to be a definite priority for Tocchet. And a player that they acquired during the offseason making headlines, Trevor Zegras, coming in a trade with Anaheim in exchange for Ryan Poehling and a pair of picks in 25 and 26. They also signed Christian Dvorak, left wing out of Montreal as a UFA, and also goaltender Dan Vladar from Calgary. So let's start with the ads, and let's talk the Zegras trade in particular, because I believe this was a player that after he came back from injury last season, had a little bit more sandpaper to his game, but I'd also said that I believed probably the best move for Zegras would be out of Anaheim, where the Michigan looked to be his trademark, and perhaps a fresh start in a new city with a new coach. See what happens.
No, you're absolutely right. And he's a Connecticut kid. So getting into Philly is a lot closer to Connecticut than Anaheim was. He made headlines when he did that Michigan move, and everybody thought about how skilled the kid is, and he is. There's no doubt about it. But they got to see what Rick Tocchet in Philadelphia can get out of him now. Will this be his time to turn his career around. When he, is he going to play with Dvorak? Is he going to play with Michkov? Who's he going to play with? And can he and Dvorak give Philadelphia two lines that can score? Because we know they've got one with Michkov and Couturier and Konechny, but they need that second line. They need that second line with Owen Tippett, and maybe Dvorak and Zegras can give them that.
This team has grown over the course of the last really 2, 3, maybe even, you can even stretch it to 4 years. A lot of these players have remained with the club. Tyson Foerster re-upped as an RFA, so did Noah Cates. And the big one for them, Cam York on defense, 5 years, 5.15 AAV. And as you mentioned, they have some pieces in place. Matvei Michkov was a Calder Trophy candidate for a good part of the season. Bobby Brink, Noah Cates, Jamie Drysdale, and Travis Sanheim. Quality players, young players, and I think a good group that Tocchet has to start to move forward with.
Tocchet has to get these guys to take the next step in their career and to improve. Again, have a better year this year than they had last year. Young players, if you can see them continue to have better and better seasons, then you're headed obviously in the right direction. And that's what Rick Tocchet and his group of coaches are going to have to do. Jamie Drysdale is a very talented young defenseman and great hands, able to do good things offensively. Let's see if he can make the next step. They've given York the big contract. Now York has to make the next step. And we've already mentioned up front with Zegras and Tippett. So if these guys can do this, Vic, maybe they've got a shot at the, being in the bubble. And by the bubble, I mean the group of teams that are banging on the door of the wild card. Maybe they can bang on the door of the wild card if they can get these young guys to take the next step.
I'm going to be curious to see what happens with their power play now, because I don't believe that they still have a true quarterback on the power play. And you could look at Drysdale. You might look at Konechny as a guy that can start to set plays up from the outside. Owen Tippett has to have a better season than he had a year ago. And that's going to be a huge key for them, is if they can move up even 10 spots in the league on the power play, that's going to make a big difference. And that's probably what kept them out of the playoffs 2 seasons ago when they just missed out on the last night of the season. The other thing to look at, the goaltending issue never seems to go away there. And of course, they thought that their goaltending issues were solved with Carter Hart, and we know how that all ended up. Sam Ersson, Ivan Fedotov, splitting the time last season. Dan Vladar has never been a number one goalie in the NHL, but does this create maybe the necessary competition to elevate everybody's game?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think it also is something that you're seeing around the league. Everybody seems to want to have 3 guys that can play in the NHL. There's goalie injuries now, I think, more than there's ever been. And Vladar gives them that NHL goaltender that's there. So if Fedotov can't do it or Sam Ersson can't do it, you've got Vladar. Now, none of them are really what you think of as a number one goalie. So there's got to be a development stage there for one of them to grab that.
But still, again, there's no number one goaltender there. And at least the opportunity presents itself. Maybe Ersson matures. Fedotov, we have seen some promise. So again, I think we're looking at potential for those two. And maybe the security blanket is Vladar in this entire scenario.
I would think that that's what Danny Briere is trying to do here, and maybe do some competition for those guys, and particularly for Fedotov, who had missed a whole year of hockey while he did his military service in Russia. So maybe he's just going to let them fight it out to see who gets that spot with Rick Tocchet and his group.
Couple of prospects to potentially look out to crack the lineup this year. Oliver Bonk, right-handed defenseman, and Jet Luchenko, who had 56 points, 46 games for Guelph, the OHL last season. He started the year with the Flyers, has some good speed, but then they sent him back so they wouldn't burn a year of eligibility. I want to hit on the drops for 1 second here because in addition to Paling going to Anaheim in the Zegras deal, Jacob Pelletier was signed as a UFA by Tampa after not receiving a qualifying offer. And Pelletier was acquired on January 31st, along with Andrei Kuzmenko from the Flames. They also got 2025 and a 2028 draft pick in exchange for Morgan Frost and Joel Farabee. But the net of this is when Kuzmenko was traded for 2 draft picks, the end result is they got 4 draft picks, and Frost and Farabee are going to probably be key components for the Calgary Flames this year.
And Kuzmenko got re-signed by Ken Holland and the LA Kings. So, and they're not high picks that Philadelphia got on those 4 picks.
Yeah.
They're not guaranteed NHL players by any means. So, yeah, kind of strange, kind of a strange move in not qualifying Pelletier. So I just think that, perhaps, I guess there was something they just didn't like about Jacob Pelletier because they got him there. You would think that would make them look pretty bad by having nothing after trading away those Frost and Farabee. But I guess they didn't like him.
And didn't even qualify him.
That's right. If you don't qualify him, and you don't either say to the agent, we're not going to qualify him, but we're going to sign him. We want to sign him, but we're not going to qualify him because we don't think he's worth his qualifying offer. That's what a lot of teams do. They didn't even do that, it looks like.
Final note on the Flyers. Rick Tocchet started his career in Philadelphia, won Stanley Cup in Pittsburgh, replaces John Tortorella. Now, both gentlemen, former Adams Trophy winning coaches, both with a hard edge. What's the difference between Tocchet and Torts?
I think that Tortorella is a much more experienced, seasoned coach than Rick Tocchet. I think Rick Tocchet has done a lot of things in his career, but I don't think he's John Tortorella. Now, having said that, I'm not sure that Rick Tocchet has as quick an expiration date on his back as John Tortorella, because John is so hard and so tough on the players and particular types of players that he usually, he moves from team to team because of that. We'll see what Tocchet can do with this group. Undoubtedly had a great season with Vancouver, won the Jack Adams Award, but then things went south on him, and you can blame management, but I think we're going to find out if Rick is a good coach or not now that he's got a team that he has to get to overachieve and has to push them to get better and develop players, develop young guys, and push the older guys to as I said, to overachieve so that they are banging on the door of the playoffs.
And some of these players should be coming more into their prime now, because when Torts took that club over a few years ago, Chuck Fletcher didn't leave the cupboard very full for him.
No, it was pretty bare, and it was rebuilding. I'll never forget it. I was stunned when he took the job because I don't see John as a coach that can rebuild teams, that like a Roger Nielsen type guy. I saw him more as a guy who gets an experienced, ready to go team and can push them over the finish line. But he did a heck of a job, I think. I know he got fired and so on, but everybody does. But I think he did a heck of a job, particularly that first year.
Anything else on the Flyers before we wrap?
No, I think I just wish my friend Keith Jones and my friend Danny Briere and my friend Rick Tocchet all the luck in the world. I think they're going to be, it's going to be tough, but they're not in a good division. So that's the good side. There's not a lot. There's no great teams. I mean, Carolina and New Jersey, as we've already spoken about, are probably the cream of the crop. After that, you could get in.
Well, let's not forget the Washington Capitals either. Number one in the East last year.
Yeah. No, let's not forget them. They're but okay. I'll give you those three.
Well, thanks for that. That'll wrap up our show for today. Thank you to our presenting sponsor, Lugaroo.
And let's thank the listeners, and let's ask you to send your email address by sending us an email at neil@nhlwraparound.com or vic@nhlwraparound.com. We want to get a mailing list together of all the people that are listening to our show and would like to hear a little bit more, maybe on a newsletter and so on. So that's the way you can reach us. If you have any questions, you can do that. Don't forget, whatever you're listening to us on right now, or if you're watching us on YouTube, we're on all the different platforms. So whether you're in your car, at your computer, or wherever you are, you can also catch us on nhlwraparound.com, where all of our shows, right back to the great one, Wayne Gretzky in January of 24, are on the website. And that website is going to get a makeover in the next few days, actually, and going to be brand new. So continue to get the word out on our show. Get people to subscribe. Please take a look at lugaroo.co and take a look at their apparel. I love it. I got their shirt on right now. So does Vic. Mine's cleaner than his is, though.
Well, we'll be changing shirts for the Central Division because that will be our next show, and that'll be dropping on Monday, August 25th. And then we wrap up with the Pacific, where at least I'll be in black. Neil, I think you will be too. That show drops on August 27th. That's a Wednesday. And remember, our summer coolers, all 32 teams, will be released as individual episodes, individual shorts on YouTube. So look for that. If you don't want to listen to an entire show and just want to pick out your favorite team or teams, then you can tune in that way and listen for 8 or 10 minutes. So on behalf of Neil, I am Vic, and we'll speak to you next time with the Central Division NHL Wraparound Summer Quarter. Take care.
Thanks for joining us on the NHL Wraparound podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all the NHL action.